Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Chof Beis Amud Beis, beginning the new parak. The 17th parak, Kol HaKelim, discusses primarily the inyan of muktzah, the halachos of muktzah. And therefore, in general, that which is not a kli and not a food item is considered to be muktzah, set aside not for the purpose of usage on Shabbos. The parak is going to discuss the geder, the definition of a kli to be considered something that is not muktzah and can be moved on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah, Kol HaKelim nitolin b'Shabbos, v'dalsoseim imohem, afal pishen isparku. It says over here that in our Mishnah, not only could the kelim be moved on Shabbos, but even their doors, the doors of a kli. Let's say a person has a chest and the top, the door itself falls off the hinges. That not only can you then metaltel the kli, the chest itself, but even the door. Because the door itself is considered to be a kli. Part of the kli, it's a part of that kli, and therefore just like the kli can be moved on Shabbos, it's not muktzah, so too the door itself. Which is not comparable to that door which is attached to the house. If that becomes detached, that's not a kli, and therefore a person cannot move the detached door that was attached to the house. The Mishnah goes on to say, various kelim that have the status of a kli shemolachtoi le'isser, which means that primarily its function is for a isser purpose on Shabbos, but it can be used for a secondary purpose that is mutter. So it's a kli shemolachtoi le'isser. So our Mishnah says like this, noitel adam kurnas, and in this category, kli shemolachtoi le'isser, we're going to soon see that a person can then use the object, the kli, for the heter purpose. In other words, he can do it litzarech gufa, he can move the object for the heter purpose on Shabbos. And in addition to that, a person can also move that kli for the place that the kli was sitting on if he needs that place, what's called litzarech mekoimoy. In other words, Chazal understood that when it comes to these kelim, since they have a purpose, even though it's not its primary function, but the secondary purpose is enough to say that a person was not maksedaito, he didn't then put it aside from usage on Shabbos, and therefore it can be moved letzarech gufo for the item itself, the kli itself, or for the place that the kli was situated, letzarech mekoimoy. Now the Mishnah says, noitel adam kurnas lepatzeya boy es hagoizim. A person can move a hammer, which generally will be used for malacha of boine and makabe patish, and since it can be used for a heter purpose to then break open nuts as a nutcracker, so you can take the patish and you can go ahead and use it to do so. You can metaltel it. Another example, kardoim lachtoich boy es hadvela. If a person has a kardoim, which is an axe, so there's a malacha normally of cutting wood, which is a malacha of chaytech, a malacha of toichen, and he can use it for a secondary function for then slicing or cutting rather dried figs. Megera logur boas hagvina. Megera, a saw, which is again normally used to cut wood, and therefore it's a malach of chaytech, of toichen, that can be used for a secondary purpose for then slicing one's cheese. Magrefa Logruf boas hagrogeres, a shovel which is normally used for the malacha of chafira, of charesh on a field, or boine if it's in a house, that can be used for a secondary function of picking up the shoveling grogeres, also these dried figs. Es harachas ves hamalgez loses alov lekotan. A rachas is a kli that's used to scoop up, usually, let's say, wheat or other types of grains, and to then throw it in the air so that it gets winnowed. That means that the wind will blow the part that is the chaff from the seeds themselves, and that's the malacha of zoyreh, but it can be used for the purpose that a person is going to then spear into a dry or a soft type of fruit, or similarly a malgez, which is a pitchfork. We have the word mazleg. Malgez is the same word with the zayin and the gimel interchanged. So if a person takes a pitchfork, which is normally used to gather in straw, which is a malach of ma'amer, he can go ahead and use it again to then spear a dried or a soft type of fruit, like a strawberry. Es hakush ves hacharkar. This is a kush is a stick that is used to spin thread. Ves hakarka, which is the stick that is used to arrange the string or the thread on a weave, and that's a malach of mesach. There's also sometimes putting the erev in the shesi. That's also the malach of ariga on Shabbos, and that's the primary function of the karkar. But you can go ahead and lachtoiv boy. You can go ahead and use it to then again spear I said something incorrect before. The malgez and the rachas can be used losis ala the cotton. I confused the two things. It's saying over here that in the previous two items, they can be used to then spear into a food, let's say to feed a kohen cotton, because a person, if he would touch the food, it would be truma food, he would have to wash his hands. So instead he puts this type of kli into the food and he feeds the kohen cotton. Or the kush and the karkar, lichai boy, this is what we were referring to before, when he sticks into a soft fruit like a strawberry. Machat shel yad, a person who takes a machaya whose primary function is to then be toifer, a beged, which is a malach on Shabbos. Litol bes hakoitz, he can take out a thorn inside of, or a splinter. V'shel sakoim, if he takes a larger type of needle that's used to make sacks. Liftoach boy es hadeles, so he can take these needles, and if he doesn't have the key to open up the lock of the door, he can use these needles in order to then manipulate the lock and open the door. So all of these cases, again, these are klisha malachtoi le'isr. The primary function is for an isr purpose on Shabbos, but since they have a heter purpose, they're not muksa when you use it l'tzorech gufoi or l'tzorech mekoimoi. Says the Gemara, asking the following question on the ratio of our Mishnah: Kol hakelim nitolin v'afal pishin nisparku b'Shabbos v'lo miboy b'chol. The Mishnah implies over here that all of the kelim that had their doors that fell off on Shabbos, and even though they fell on Shabbos, not only during the week. In other words, it implies that there's an emphasis that even though it was Shabbos and the doors fell off, let's say of the chest, nonetheless, you can go ahead and metaltel that door. Ask the Gemara, Adirabba, b'Shabbos muchonin agabe avian, b'chol ein muchonin agabe avian. The bigger chiddush is when they fell off, then the door fell off of the chest during the week. But on Shabbos, it was already entered Shabbos while it was part of the kli. So the fact that you can carry the door is not a bigger chiddush, it's a lesser chiddush, since it was a kli at the entrance to Shabbos, so therefore you can carry the door of the kli. But when it comes to the weekday, that already is a bigger chiddush, because there it entered Shabbos already not being part of the kli. Omar Abaye hachi ka Omar. Abaye explains the Mishnah as follows: Kol hakelim nitolin b'Shabbos v'dal sosein imohem afal pishin isparku b'chol nitolin b'Shabbos. The chiddush over here is that the kli itself, since it's something that you can metaltel on Shabbos, so even if the door were to break off during the week, since the door is part of the kli, it has the status of the kli, and just as you can metaltel the kli, you can metaltel the delis as well. So the emphasis of afal pi is going on, even though it's not part right now, it's not attached to the chest, to the kli, it can still then be now moved on Shabbos. It's not muktzah. Tanu Rabbon, the Gemara brings the following brayso: Deles shel shida v'shel teva v'shel migdal noitlin avaloi machzirin. It says in here in the brayso, if one has a deles that is on one of these let's say Sheda Teva or Migdal, let's say a chest or an aron, a closet, right? So if he has it, so it says that you can take it off the delit on Shabbos, but you cannot. I mean, you can remove it, but you cannot put it back on. When it comes to the delis of a chicken coop, there it says that you cannot take it off, nor can you put it on. Ask the Gemara, Bishlama shel lu shel tarnegolim kisover kevan de mechabre be'ara yesh binyan bekarka yesh dir bekarka. When it comes to the chicken coop, we understand that since the chicken coop is a binyan, for you to remove the delis from the chicken coop, that would be a malacha of stira, and for you to put it on the chicken coop would be a malacha of binyan. So we understand that the two corollaries are going to be a malacha. Elashel shida v'shel teva v'shel migdal. My kisovar. Why do we say that removing is mutter, whereas then putting on would be osir? If you want to tell me that we hold that there's binyan bekelim, then there's also stira bekelim, because that's its corollary. The ain stira bekelim, then ain binyan bekelim. And if there's no stira bekelim, then there's no binyan bekelim either. So let's be consistent. Why say that you can go ahead and remove the door, right, which would be a stira, right, but you cannot be machzir, which would be a binyan. If there's no stira, then there's no binyan. If there's yes a stira, then there's a binyan as well. Or the opposite. If there's a binyan, then there's a stira. And there's no binyan, there's no stira. Omar Abaye, La'oilom kisovar yesh binyan bekelim yesh stira bekelim. Abaye says there is binyan bekelim and stira bekelim, and therefore it would be aser. Vishenitlu ka'omer, but over here we're talking about it was already removed. And therefore it's saying over here you cannot machzir the door onto the kli, onto the sheda teva migdal. Omar le'rave, shteit shuvos b'dover. I have two things to then answer why this is a problematic type of way explaining the brisa. Chada de nitolin kitani. It really should be read Chada de noitlin kitani. First of all, it states that you can take it off. It doesn't say it was already off. It says you can take it off and you can't be machzir. And secondly, chva'oid my aval loy machzirin. If it was already off, why would it say and you cannot put it back? Why did it say aval loy machzirin, but you cannot put it back? If it was already off, you wouldn't say it's off, but you cannot put it back. But you cannot put it back. It assumes that you did something before to then take it off. Elomarove kisovar ein binyan bekelim ve'ein stira bekelim. There is no binyan bekelim, says Rava, and there's no stira bekelim. We asked, why is it mutter ben to take the delis off of the shida, teva, and migdal, but to be machzir would be aser? Because we're concerned maybe if a person were to be machzir the delis, he might put it in such a fashion that it'll be a malach of makah bepatish, and therefore they asked even to then machzir it. The Gemara now quotes the Mishnah as saying, Noitel Adam Kurnas. This is the first of all of the lists of these kelim that we said have a primary function that is osir, but can be used for a secondary function, a klisha malachta leisir. Omar Rav Yehuda explains the Mishnah as follows: Kornis shel egoizim liftsoya boy es hagoizim. He's learning that the kornis that we're talking about in the Mishnah is a kornis, a hammer that's made to crack nuts, and therefore you can go ahead and crack nuts with it. In other words, it's a regular kli for that intended purpose. It's not a kli that even is a malachta leisir. It's a kli shel malachta leheter, because the primary function is to then open nuts. It's not a regular hammer. Aval shel napochin loy. But if it was a hammer of a blacksmith, you would not be able to use it to then crack open a nut. Kisover dovesh malachta leisir afilu tzar gufoy osir. It comes out that Rav Yehuda holds a klisha malachta leisir, as we described before. In this case, a hammer that is normally used for binyan and for makibeh patish, but it has a secondary usage. You can still use it for a heter purpose of cracking open your your nuts. According to Rav Yehuda, that would be aser, not only to use letzarek gufo, but certainly also then letzarek mekoimoy. Omar le Rabbi ela me'ato seifa diktani ves harachas ves hamalgez loses alav lekoton. Asks Rabbah that the Mishnah states later on, other examples of kelim. It says a rachas, which we said is like a form of a shovel, has a long stick, and it's used to then pick up, let's say, wheat or barley, and to throw it into the air to do winnowing, a malach of zoira on Shabbos. The Mishnah says you can use that for a secondary purpose, to pick up food and give it to a katan who's a kohen. So ask Rabbah, rachas umalges mimiyachde lekatan. Who would ever miyached these instruments for a katan, just to be able to feed a kohen katan so he doesn't have to then wash his hands? Rather, of course, we're talking about where its primary function is for the malacha of winnowing, or for the malacha of ma'amer, if you're going to gather in together the straw with the malges, and therefore to kli shemalachta le'iser. Ela omar rabbe kurnis shel nefachin lepatzei bayagos. We're talking about a blacksmith's hammer that can still be used in order to then, on Shabbos, even to then open up your nuts, to crack open the nuts, l'tzarek gufoy, and also if you needed the place where it's situated, you can pick up the kli, the hammer of the blacksmith, l'tzarek makoimoy. Kesover davar shemalachta li'iser l'tzarek gufoy muter. And therefore, Rabbah concludes that a kli shemalachta li'iser, if you're going to use it for l'tzarek gufoy, and we can add also l'tzarek makoimoy, it is muter.